Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Indie Pop Girl, the podcast for music chat, new releases, hidden gems, and nostalgic deep dives. For this week, I'm continuing with the underrated gems, and this series looks at albums that deserved more attention. It could be overlooked indie records, misunderstood pop albums, or hidden gems from big artists. I will be discussing a dreampop record from 2022 which was definitely overlooked, and that is Giving the World Away from Hatchie. And before we get into the episode, if you enjoy music episodes like this, please consider following the podcast or leaving a like depending on where you're listening. It really helps the show reach more people, and it means a lot for a small independent podcast like this one. Giving the World Away is the second studio album by Australian pop singer-songwriter and musician Hatchie. It was released on the 22nd of April 2022 through Secretly Canadian. It is the follow-up to her 2019 debut, Keepsake, and Hatchie began working on the project in February 2020 in Los Angeles. Due to the global pandemic, she returned back home to Australia and continued to work on the project with her partner in Brisbane. The production and mixing duties were handled by George Albrecht, and the record was finally completed in 2021. The album continues Hatchie's trademark dream pop sound, incorporated with shoegaze textures. Giving the World Away also includes elements of 90s dance music and the indie baggy trend that was popular in the UK and beyond. She also took inspiration from Saint Etienne, Cocteau Twins and 90s pop. But what is striking about this record is that it doesn't sound like a pastiche of the past. Hatchie manages to make this project all her own. She experiments with sounds that make it feel fresh and accessible. The stunning artwork, the image of Hatchie taken from the Disenchanted video with angel wings, seems like a subtle nod to Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. And if you own a copy of this album on vinyl, then you will know that the sleeve is in fact holographic and looks gorgeous on display when the record is spinning. I was unaware of Hatchie and her work, and I discovered her and this record through browsing YouTube. It was one of those happy accidents that I'm sure many of you listening will relate to. It was the track Lights On that was recommended to me, and I fell down the Hatchie rabbit hole, as you do. I adore dream pop and shoegaze, and it was refreshing seeing a modern artist tackle these genres in this way. The hooks and melodies on Giving the World Away are very pop driven, and it is a pop record at its heart. But the songwriting and production is so strong all the way. The tracks are consistent and cohesive. Hatchie's dreamy vocals, often used like texture in itself, is just pure ear candy to me, especially when she uses a shit ton of reverb on her voice. It's no surprise that I was immediately hooked by falling down that Hatchie rabbit hole that day. Disenchanted sealed the deal for me to go and check the record out properly, and it was a lovely headphones moment. I was able to sit down and fully immerse myself in the sounds, and a record like this is so rewarding on every level. I ended up purchasing the vinyl shortly after, and it also sounds wonderful. The synths and textures really pop on vinyl, and you end up having a completely different experience with the record that way. That is so rewarding as a listener, and you can fully appreciate the attention to detail with the production. And of course, you end up giving a record like this so many repeated listens. Since I launched my podcast back in June 2025, I always had Giving the World Away in the back of my mind. It's a record that I've always wanted to cover, but wasn't sure which series it would fit in the best. I think it follows on nicely from the first episode in this series, Lost Girls by Bat for Lashes from last week. Whereas Lost Girls took inspiration from the 1980s, Giving the World Away feels like it belongs during the summer of 1990. It's a record that deserves to break out into the mainstream. More people need to know about Hatchie and her work. And if you love dream pop and shoegaze with huge pop choruses, then you are in the right place. It fits in perfectly with the Underrated Gems series because that's exactly what it is. I hope after this episode is finished, you will check out the album and the rest of Hatchie's discography. You might even do what I did and fall down the YouTube rabbit hole. Trust me, this record is an absolute stunner. As I have mentioned in previous episodes, I will not be playing clips of the songs, so if you are curious, then please support the artists I cover by streaming, downloading, or buying physical copies. Thank you. Track 1, Lights On. As soon as you hear that guitar in the intro, you just know you're about to be transported straight back to the 90s. There's something instantly familiar about it, like you've heard it before somewhere, but at the same time, it still feels completely fresh. That opening moment really pulls you in. Lights On is pure pop perfection with this dreamy, shimmering edge that I absolutely love. If you think the chorus is catchy, just wait until that post chorus comes in because that's where the song really takes off. It's one of those tracks where the melodies just keep unfolding, hook after hook, and it feels like they could go on forever. The rhythm keeps everything moving forward with this confident driving pulse. But over the top of that, you've got these glistening guitars and soft synth layers that give the whole song a beautiful sense of lift. It captures that very specific indie dance crossover energy, the kind of sound you'd associate with bands like Saint Etienne or The Charlatans, but blended with a modern synth pop polish. The production really shines here too. The drums give the track its momentum, while the guitars and synths swirl around in the background, adding texture and atmosphere. Hatchie's vocals feel a little more front and centre on this song as well, which feels like a deliberate choice. As the opening track, it does a brilliant job of setting the tone for everything that follows on the album. It's honestly such a shame that this wasn't a hit for Hatchie because it really has all the ingredients for it. It feels like the kind of song that could have been everywhere with regular radio airplay. It's widescreen pop with a slight melancholic edge, and it's an absolutely perfect way to open the record. Track 2, Disenchanted. The intro to Disenchanted never fails to give me chills. That 90s style piano coming in alongside the drums and bass is just genius. From the first few seconds, you can tell you're about to hear something special. This is where Hatchie really excels as a songwriter. The song has that irresistible pop sensibility at its core, but it's wrapped up in layers of dream pop and a touch of shoegaze, which gives it a completely unique character. It's catchy, but it also feels expansive and immersive at the same time. There's definitely a real wall of sound feeling in the production. While Lights On leans more toward a traditional pop structure, this Enchanted dives headfirst into these dense, swirling guitars. Everything feels huge and expansive, creating this massive, blissed out atmosphere that really fills the space. It almost feels like a modern update on bands like Ride or My Bloody Valentine. Hatchie's voice sounds even dreamier here too. Instead of cutting through the instrumentation, it almost floats above it, drifting across the top of all those guitars and synths. The melody itself is incredibly catchy and bright, which creates a really interesting contrast with the thick, hazy production underneath. And then there's that guitar solo in the bridge, which instantly reminds me of the Cocteau Twins, especially the sound of their Heaven or Las Vegas era. It's shimmering, melodic, and just completely beautiful. At its heart, this is simply a perfectly structured pop song, just dressed in shoegaze textures and dreamy production. And honestly, just like with Lights On, it's another moment on this album where you can't help thinking Hatchie deserved to have a massive hit on her hands. Track 3, Twin. What a track run we're having here, because Twin is easily one of my favourites on the entire record. For me, this song is a masterpiece in every sense. The way it's structured, the arrangement, the instrumentation, the production, and vocals, it all just comes together in harmony. I've mentioned before on the podcast that I'm always drawn to artists who blend synths and electronic elements with live instrumentation, and this track is a perfect example of that balance done right. It has this driving, almost mechanical beat running through it that gives the song a real sense of momentum. It sits somewhere on the edge of trip hop and late 90s alternative dance, which gives the whole track a slightly darker, more hypnotic foundation. Unlike some of the earlier songs, which have that looser indie dance feel, this one feels a bit tighter and more structured rhythmically. That tension in the beat creates a really interesting backdrop for Hatchie's vocals to sit on top of. Her vocal delivery here is also a little different. It feels softer and more breathy, almost intimate, which adds another layer of texture to the track. It's one of the things I really love about this album. Hatchie isn't just leaning into one nostalgic sound. Instead, she's pulling together all these different sonic textures from the 90s and blending them into something that still feels completely modern. And then we get to that heavenly bridge, which is just pure dream pop ear candy. It's one of those moments where everything opens up and the atmosphere becomes even dreamier and it feels like you are floating. Then the piano comes in, carrying that chorus melody, and it's just such a beautiful moment in the song. Holy shit, it makes you ascend. Honestly, when that section hits, I could happily listen to it loop for another 10 minutes. It's one of those little musical moments in the record that just feels perfect. This is pop with real substance, executed at such a high level. Track 4, Take My Hand. Take My Hand is another moment on this album that instantly transports me straight back to the 90s, and I absolutely love it. One thing that really stands out across this record is how beautiful Hatchie's intros are. She has such a great sense of how to pull you into a song, and the way she uses that 90s style piano here is just genius. It creates this warm, nostalgic atmosphere right from the start. Then those guitar textures come in and really elevate the track even further. The song is defined by those bright, jangly guitars that feel very rooted in 90s indie pop. It has that clean, chorus heavy guitar tone that you'd often hear with bands like the Sundays or even The Cure, where the guitars shimmer rather than dominate. Hatchie's vocals are much more upfront here as well, and the production across the track is beautifully balanced. Even with all the layers going on, her voice never feels drowned out. Instead, it sits perfectly in the mix. Her vocals are layered and airy, almost creating what I'd describe as a wall of sweetness that floats above the driving rhythm underneath. And the chorus is absolutely massive. It's one of those choruses that feels designed to live in your head for the rest of the day. Incredibly catchy, bright, and uplifting. There's also a really interesting moment during the bridge where a spoken sample comes in. It almost sounds like it's taken from a film or something similar, and it's quite unusual when it first appears. But I actually love little surprises like that in songs. Moments like that keep you engaged and remind you that there's always something new to notice when you listen again. Track 5, The Rhythm. The intro to The Rhythm is so satisfying. You've got those shoegaze textures immediately setting the atmosphere, and then the drums and bass come in to give it that driving foundation. Just when you think you've got a feel for the track, those synths arrive and lift everything even further. It's a really energizing opening, and the whole song leans confidently into Hatchie's love of 90s electronic and dance pop influences. At this point in the album, it's probably no surprise why I love this record so much. So many moments across these songs just get stuck in your head. It might be a melody, a synth line, or even a small production detail, but they become these little earworms that you will find going round and round in your head. It's one of the things that makes this album so addictive. You want to keep replaying it because every time you do, you notice something new. There are so many subtle layers in the production that reveal themselves over time. On this track in particular, the synth work is fantastic. The textures shift constantly, adding movement and colour to the song. The drums also hit quite hard in the mix at certain points, giving the track a bit of weight and momentum. But even with that energy, the arrangement keeps twisting and evolving, so the song never feels predictable. It keeps you engaged all the way through. Track 6, Quicksand. Quicksand is a really interesting moment on the album because Dan Nigro is credited here as both co-writer and producer. He also contributes guitar and keyboards on the track, and you can definitely feel his presence throughout the song, especially when that incredibly catchy chorus arrives. The whole track instantly feels a little bigger and more structurally polished compared to some of Hatchie's earlier material. That's not a criticism at all. It just shows what happens when you bring someone in who really understands the mechanics of a great pop song and how to expand Hatchie's sound even further. The verses have this slightly darker, more introspective mood to them, and then the song suddenly opens up into that bright, uplifting chorus. It's a really effective contrast, and the payoff when the chorus hits is huge. What's really interesting here is the balance between the two creative forces. Hatchie is clearly bringing the atmosphere, the hazy guitars, the dreamy textures, and all those beautiful 90s influences that run throughout the album. But Dan Nigro is someone who really understands the architecture of a hit song. You can hear that in the way Quicksand builds and releases tension, leading perfectly into that massive, undeniable chorus. And honestly, once that chorus gets into your head, it is not going anywhere for a while. It's one of those melodies that sticks with you for days. Overall, this is just a really strong pop song. The production is slick without losing that dreamy, hatchy identity, and the vocal performance is fantastic throughout. It actually makes me hope that Hatchie and Dan Nigro work together again in the future, because if they ever made a full album together, it could be something really special. Track 7, Thinking of. I've always thought this track works almost like an interlude right at the halfway point of the record. It's a little shorter than the surrounding songs, and because of that, it feels like a natural pause before the album moves into its second half. The instrumental has a really lovely live band feel to it, with dreamy vocals drifting across the top. It acts almost like a palate cleanser after the run of bigger, more energetic tracks earlier in the album. Everything here feels a little bit softer and a little bit more reflective. Musically, it leans more into guitars again, with that unmistakable 90s atmosphere running through it. There are also some really nice touches of piano that add warmth and depth to the arrangement. Nothing feels overly complicated. It's more about the mood the song creates. I'd probably describe it as a kind of sonic mood piece. It just floats along gently, letting the textures and atmosphere do most of the work. Because it's shorter than many of the other tracks on the album, it never overstays its welcome either. And I think the placement of it on the record really works. It gives you a moment to breathe before the album shifts gears slightly, and it sets things up perfectly for the title track that follows, which feels a bit more experimental in comparison. Track 8, Giving the World Away. The title track, Giving the World Away, is quite an unusual moment on the album. It leans into a very different groove compared to some of the earlier tracks. There's a definite 90s baggy rhythm running through it, the kind of loose, danceable groove that a lot of the Manchester bands were known for at the time. But layered over the top of that are these darker, more atmospheric synths that almost feel inspired by something like Depeche Mode. The combination gives the song a really interesting character. It's got that relaxed, rolling rhythm underneath, but then these deeper synth textures add a slightly mysterious edge to it. When the piano comes in during the chorus, it lifts the whole track and gives it this slightly trippy, almost hypnotic quality with a psychedelic edge that I really love. Listening back to it recently, I'd definitely say this is one of the more experimental moments on the album. Hatchie is still using the dream pop elements that run throughout the record, the hazy guitars and shoegaze textures. But here she blends them with that groove heavy, danceable energy. It feels like she's drawing on the spirit of bands like the Stone Roses, Happy Mondays, and the Charlatans from the late 80s and early 90s, where indie music and dance culture was starting to blur together. But she filters those influences through her own dreamy modern sound, which makes the track feel nostalgic and fresh at the same time. Track 9, The Key. Those dream pop vocals in the intro get me every single time. There's something about the way the song opens that immediately pulls you in. It feels soft, atmospheric with some gorgeous texture. The melody here is absolutely gorgeous. The chorus in particular is incredibly dreamy. It just floats along with so much ease. And then, just as you settle into that moment, the drums and guitars kick in, and suddenly you get this huge shoegaze explosion that completely transforms the track. What Hatchie does so well on this song is balance those two sides of her sound. On one hand, you've got this delicate dream pop melodies, and on the other, you've got these powerful walls of guitar that bring in that shoegaze intensity. The way those elements blend together here feels completely natural. Listening back to it in preparation for this episode, I also get really strong Wolf Alice vibes from this track, especially with their Blue Weekend era, which also plays with that dreamy shoegaze inspired sound. Hatchie's vocal tone and delivery actually remind me quite a lot of Ali Rousel at times in this track. Honestly, I can't help thinking that Wolf Alice would deliver an absolutely fucking incredible cover version of this song. It feels like something they would absolutely nail. And for me, this is definitely one of the standout moments on the record. Track 10, Don't Leave Me in the Rain. I always love it when acoustic guitars are blended with synths, and Hatchie uses that combination beautifully on this track. It creates this really warm, textured sound where the organic and electronic elements work together perfectly. The tempo here slows down slightly compared to some of the earlier songs, but it never loses its sense of power or momentum. What I really enjoy is how the production gradually builds as the song progresses. The verses feel soft and dreamy, almost gently drifting along, and then the chorus arrives with this really satisfying lift. It's one of those moments where the arrangement opens up and everything suddenly feels bigger and more emotional. The song has that really nice balance that runs throughout the album. It sounds fresh and contemporary, but at the same time, it carries that nostalgic feeling that makes you feel like you've been transported back to the 90s. I know I've said it a few times already during this episode, but the songwriting on this record really is impressive. The tracks rarely go exactly where you expect them to go. Just when you think you've settled into the direction of a song, Hatchie introduces a new texture or musical shift that keeps things interesting. Vocally, there are moments here where her delivery actually reminds me a little bit of Taylor Swift in terms of tone and clarity. And then by the time you reach the outro, she almost shifts into full Elizabeth Fraser territory with those soaring, ethereal vocal layers. Fucking amazing. Track 11, Sunday Song. What a beautiful track this is. It has this incredibly calm, dreamy atmosphere that almost feels like you're just floating on clouds while listening to it. Everything about the track feels gentle and comforting and has the perfect title. It leans into that peaceful Sunday morning territory. This is dream pop at its most effective. The textures are soft and hazy, the melody is soothing, and the whole song has this warm, glowing quality that really draws you in. As a penultimate track on the album, it works perfectly because it gives the record a chance to slow down and breathe before the final song arrives. There's also a really nice full circle moment here that connects back to the opening track, Lights On, when Hatchie sings, "But I could leave a light on for you." It feels like a subtle callback that ties the album together beautifully. Little details like that make the whole record feel thoughtfully constructed. The repetition of the chorus also adds to that dreamy, hypnotic feeling. It almost feels like the song is gently drifting along, repeating that sentiment over and over, which really captures the emotional mood of being completely wrapped up in love. It's hazy, romantic, and incredibly atmospheric, and it sets up the closing track of the album perfectly. Track 12, Till We Run Out of Air. This is another one of my highlights from the album, and honestly, it's exactly how you should end a record. Till We Run Out of Air brings together so many of the elements that make this album special. Hatchie blends pop, dream pop, shoegaze, and indie influences all into one track, and the way it builds towards that beautiful chorus is incredibly satisfying. The song gradually grows in intensity, layering guitars, synths, and rhythm until everything opens up into that huge uplifting chorus. It feels expansive and emotional at the same time, which makes it such a powerful closing moment for the record. To me, this has hit single written all over it. I honestly don't understand why more people aren't talking about Hatchie, because she deserves so much more commercial success than she's had so far. Songs like this prove just how strong her songwriting and production instincts really are. One thing I really love here is the way the background vocals are used. They sit quite low in the mix, buried in reverb, which gives the chorus this hazy, dreamy atmosphere. It's subtle, but it adds so much depth and texture to the sound. That balance between the vocals and the instrumentation is actually quite difficult to pull off, especially when you're working with shoegaze style textures. But Hatchie manages it perfectly. The guitars never completely overwhelm the song. Instead, they act more like a shimmering layer of texture sitting over the dream pop core. This is also one of those tracks where you really notice the production details if you listen with a good pair of headphones. There are so many layers and little moments hidden in the mix that reveal themselves over time. For me, it's the perfect closing statement for the album. It captures everything that makes Giving the World Away so special, melodic, atmospheric, nostalgic, and completely immersive. An underrated record in every sense, and truly a hidden gem in the pop universe. So we have reached the end of Giving the World Away by Hatchie, and for me this record absolutely earns its place in the Underrated Gem series. What makes this album so special is the way it blends so many different sounds and textures together so effortlessly. You've got the dreamy, shimmering atmosphere of dream pop, those huge walls of guitar that nod towards shoegaze, and then all these beautiful synth layers and melodies that feel rooted in 90s alternative and indie pop. It's nostalgic without ever feeling like a copy of the past. Hatchie takes those influences and reshapes them into something that still sounds modern and fresh. The textures on this record are just incredible. There are swirling guitars, lush synths, layered vocals with reverb, and so many little details hidden throughout the production that reveal themselves the more you listen. It's the kind of album that really rewards repeat plays, especially if you listen on headphones. It also sounds fantastic spinning on vinyl. What I find surprising is that an album this strong seemed to slip a little under the radar when it came out. It never quite broke through to the mainstream in the way it probably deserved to. Because when you listen to these songs, the melodies are huge, the choruses are unforgettable, and the production is absolutely beautiful. That's exactly why it fits perfectly into the Underrated Gem series. This is one of those records that might not have had the massive commercial moment it deserved, but artistically it's fantastic from start to finish. I just want to note that the album was expanded through the Digital Deluxe, which was released in 2023, and the additional tracks serve as a continuation of the standard track list, and it's worth your time if you want to discover more Hatchie. And if you haven't heard Giving the World Away before, I really hope this episode encourages you to go and check it out for yourself. It's one of those albums that just pulls you into its world. Dreamy, nostalgic, and completely immersive. And if you are a fan of dream pop and shoegaze, I guarantee that you will find something to love inside this wonderful collection of songs. And honestly, the more people who discover Hatchie through this record, the better. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If you've enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you could follow, like or share, as it helps other music lovers discover my podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the Indie Pop Girl podcast. It really helps the algorithm push the video out to more people, and as a small independent podcast that's still growing, every like and subscription genuinely makes a huge difference. I'm posting full episodes, shorts and little teasers over there, so there's always something new to watch. Let me know in the comments if you love Hatchie, and let me know what your favourite track is. I always read and respond to comments, and I love hearing what you all think. You can also find me on Instagram and Threads at the Indie Pop Girl, and on TikTok at the Indie Pop Girl podcast. And if you want to dive even deeper, there's a public Spotify playlist called Favourite Tracks from Podcast Episodes, where I add some of my top picks from each record I cover. It's updated as new episodes drop, so you might just find your next obsession. I'll be back very soon for another instalment in the Underrated Gems series. For the next episode, I'll be talking about a 2010 pop debut from a Manchester duo that finally had a vinyl repress last year. Until then, I'm Rachel, the Indie Pop Girl. Thanks for listening, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.